So Teresa and Jim Schiffler, I'll let them introduce themselves as well, but they're here and they'll be talking about the lake that they live on, which is Little Long Lake.
All right. Thank you, Erica. We appreciate that. As she said, we're Teresa and Jim Schiffler, and we live at Little Long Lake, which on the next slide, you'll see is it's a 154 acre spring fed lake located in south central Michigan and northeast Indiana. We are a two-state lake, almost divided equally. Two states gives us increased resources, but it also gives us increased regulations to deal with. We're part of the Upper St. Joe River, which combines to make the Maumee River and ultimately goes to the western basin of Lake Erie. Our watershed, as you can see in this picture, is predominantly comprised of agriculture, both row crops and more recently, some livestock feeding operations. Go on to the next one, Erica. Thank you. In the early or in the summers of 20 and 2020 and 2021, so the riparian owners of the lake began to notice some water quality issues, some clarity issues that we just weren't seeing to the depths that we were at the end of our dock. And so, a lot of talk among the neighbors, and we finally got together and started to brainstorm some ideas and got a task force. And we partnered with a neighboring lake that was a much more established association. We didn't have a watershed or a lake association. We had little individual ones at that time. And then we also partnered with an organization from Indiana, or Steuben County, Indiana, has a Lakes Council where it's an organization that supports the local lakes in that county. And they do some water testing, and they helped us get started on inlet water sampling and helped us to analyze some of that and alerted us to some concerns. And therefore that led us to branching out to working with some other agencies like the ones listed, IDEM and Eagle and the DNRs and all the local governments. Go ahead to the next one, Erica. Thank you. And because neither Jim nor I have a background in aquatic biology or limnology, we knew that we had to quickly grow our knowledge base. And so with the help of our local Eagle field agent, we identified our watershed and then also found out that we had a watershed management plan that was about 10 years old at the time, but it gave us a good start of what they had already done for our watershed in analyzing it and identifying the stakeholders in the area. So then that helped us. And again, with that encouragement, we formed a whole lake watershed association or a whole lake association and set up a 501c3 status, which really became very important for us moving on in the future. And then we just continued to expand that knowledge, and we sought out as many conferences and webinars, and we attended ag field days. We got trained in different water sampling techniques through the Indiana University Clean Lakes program, also the Hoosier River Watch, and then ultimately some other agencies we worked with were SRAP, Water Rangers, we were trained in Bowling Green State University. And we did take the MSU. I highly recommend the MSU Extension Lakes 101 class. That was brilliant. And we became involved. We learned about water quality monitoring and we joined various boards. Next slide, Erica. Thank you. And then in June 2022, we recorded the occurrence of an algae bloom, probably not the first algae bloom on Little Long Lake, but the first one that we were able to identify. We pulled some water samples and it was identified as an algal bloom. Next slide.
So as Therese mentioned, with Indiana Clean Lakes program, which is similar to MyCore, if any of you are involved with MyCore, it's many of the same criteria, but they had some established monitoring on our lake. So they were doing the lake basins, and Steuben County Lakes Council was helping us with the inlets to the lake, which are on the Michigan side of the lake. But with a connection from one of our riparian owners, we got together with Bowling Green State University, who managed freshwater monitoring for North America at that time. They helped us kind of formalize bringing those different areas together and asked us to also include monitoring the weir. So Steuben County Lakes Council, we were doing total phosphorus, total nitrogen, suspended solids, E. coli, but then also dissolved oxygen and temp. In the Indiana Clean Lakes program was chlorophyll A, total phosphorus, total nitrogen, and again, monitoring the dissolved oxygen and temperatures at each meter in the basins. What the Bowling Green program provided for us was a couple of things. All the things mentioned above, with the exception of E. coli and chlorophyll A, but we had the nitrates and the phosphorus, but we added dissolved reactive phosphorus, ammonia, and then also we were gathering a raw water sample for toxin from the basins only. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. So we really intensified our sampling, and this is just an example of the in-lake sampling. And the sampling we were doing in the lake was the top 2 meters of the lake surface. And so we started recording all this information, collecting the samples, all samples, whether it was Clean Lakes program, Steuben County, or the Bowling Green relationship, all went to certified labs. So there was a lot of combinations of data collected day of on the lake, like temperature, DO, those things, but then also all the water samples were sent to certified labs. So if you can go to the next page. We also, with the Lake Association that had been formed, started doing some out of season or out of cycle sampling. We noticed that we had snow melt and rain events in the winter months. And so in fall, winter, and spring. And so we also collected a few samples during that period of time to add to the base of knowledge that we were collecting. If you can move to the next slide, please. So what all of this provided finally, so we've got 3 years of data and we're in our 4th season right now, is quite a bit of information, and now some trend lines are starting to appear. So some of the data is now being converted into visualizations that allow us to see correlations between rain events and nutrient levels. And when we have a HAB, what happened preceding that, during that, and following that, so that is there some sort of predictability to what's going on? And that's still an ongoing thing. We're not here and ready to proclaim that we fully understand what's going on there. But the other kind of data and information that we're providing is when we do have a HAB, we report it to Eagle, and that ends up in the database. So our lake does have documented HAB situations and events, and that's in their database. But the one thing that's kind of really stood out over the 3 years of complete data that we have now is even when we don't have an observed algal bloom, whether it's a blue-green alga or other algas, is we have toxins in the water consistently throughout the season, whether it's spring, summer, fall. And that was a real eye-opener for us, was that we didn't necessarily need to see a HAB in order to have toxins present in the lake that the algae was producing as it was going through its natural life cycle. So that was a big eye-opener for us. And a bit of interesting information that we wouldn't have had we not been drawing samples regularly for toxins. Next slide, please.
So not only did all of the data collection just help us to understand what was going on in our lake, it was also beneficial in us applying for some Eagle grants, and that we were the benefit of one of them, and some targeted monitoring requests, again, from Eagle, so that it became more into their database. So it wasn't just citizen science that we were doing than we had
Mhm.
Eagle certified science. And then it also even ultimately led to, we shared a concern that we had found with Eagle, and it led to them finding a site violation at a local ag producer, and that got remedied. And so that was a good result from just our testing. Next slide. And then the data helped us to branch out and inform our community. And we, because of what we learned and what we were bringing in, we were able to share that into more digestible information for the community, our riparian owners, and then also to help them understand some action plan of what they could do as homeowners on the lake to help mitigate some of the phosphorus and the results of the phosphorus causing the harmful algal blooms. Next slide, please. And all of that are just things we have learned and continue to learn. Starting like the lake didn't become compromised overnight. And so it isn't going to clear up that quickly either. Everyone would like it to clear up that quickly, but we've learned a new term called glacial speed. And that's about the speed that we're making progress, but it is progress.
We also, the monitoring in the data and the observations about when HABs happen and conditions that create those HABs is pointed to, there's likely not one cause for it, right? That creates elevated nutrients in our watershed. And so there's also likely not just one solution for that. So it's really expanded our understanding of how to prioritize and how to pursue what some of the cause and solutions are.
Even invasive aquatic vegetation is better than no vegetation. Right now, we are suffering greatly on our lake with limited vegetation. And yet there are some invasives that also inhibit some boating. And so we're trying to work with the riparian owners and understanding that aquatic vegetation treatment can be smaller and doesn't have to be broadcast through the whole lake.
Again, information, so data. We've gone from purely guessing to now having some more concrete ideas about what's causing issues, and then working together as a community to figure out how to resolve that. So the information is really important. The information gathering is important to help create those insights.
And as I said, citizen science is important. Sometimes it can get discouraged when you think that the data you're collecting it is not being used, but it is. Like we said, it was used for different items, for grants, for monitoring. So it is important.
Another key learning was once people start to understand the situation, and especially if they observe it, they want it fixed immediately. And almost everyone wants somebody else to fix it. And so be patient with getting people on board in terms of them becoming part of the solve for the things that you're identifying.
Early on in the thing, we were introduced as, this is Jim and Therese, they're going to fix our lake. And we had to make sure that didn't keep carrying on. And so then actually the next point is look at being a good role model yourself. And so look at your property and identify what changes you can do to begin to change. I created this little motto that I repeat frequently, that when you know better, you have to do better. We, early in our riparian ownership, we made some mistakes. We took out some shoreline vegetation. It is now growing back and we're replacing it.
You may find yourself repeating a lot of the things you've learned with people. Just keep sharing that information. Don't stop sharing it, even when they ask the same question over and over. A lot of this is people don't have extensive backgrounds in, like Therese said, limnology or other biological things. And so just be patient and continue to share as often as you can, and help your community grow in their knowledge about the issue and then how to work on those issues.
remember to get involved in the community outside of the lake, that it's not just a lake issue, it's a watershed. And having community involvement is so important to keep them engaged. Ours is a public lake, and so we want to make sure that other members of the community that are using our lake are also aware of what's going on.
Yeah, and then also don't stop learning. There's always new information, new webinars, classes, conferences. There's new solutions that are being introduced all the time, and maybe different ways to get more specific information about what some of the causes may be. So just be a lifelong learner and keep asking questions and don't stop learning.
Right. So our three critical components of a watershed community are data, knowledge, and engagement. We think that those three things carry you a long way in this process. And with the next slide, we want to make sure that you are aware of an Inland Lake Field Day coming up September 8th, which will carry on with data, knowledge, and engagement.
So it'll be here at Little Long Lake on
Right.
that date. So we hope you were able to join us. And thank you so much for your time this evening and allowing us to share our story with you.
Right.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Therese and Jim. We've got time for a couple questions, so I'm gonna turn it over to Geneva to queue up those questions.
Okay.
Yes, thank you so much. We've got some good questions in the Q&A box. I think some of them we might save for later because they're questions that Therese and Jim or some of the other speakers might be able to speak to. But one specific for you guys, were you sampling for benthic mats or sort of growth that occurs down at the bottom of the lake that can happen at the same time as the blooms that show up toward the surface?
Yeah, not currently. We don't, we're not knowledgeable in how to do that, but we are as a lake community looking at having a lake shed assessment done by an outside firm in which the lake bed would be tested or monitored for, what kind of phosphorus we have there and any other clues that we might learn from that type of assessment.
And we have done 2 years in a row and are working on our third year of aquatic vegetation survey where they do the rake survey.
The tier 2. Yeah.
Yep, the tier 2 survey for a rake test. Yep.
But not the mats yet. We're still rookies at this, so we're still learning.
You say you're rookies, but you seem to have a wonderful breadth of experience, and I'm sure thanks a lot to the trainings that you guys have taken. Can you tell us a little bit about getting started with the MyCore program, what that was like from your end?
We have not utilized MyCore because, as Jim said, the Indiana University Clean Lakes program was already doing some monitoring on our lake. So we just went with their route, and they allow us to monitor both sides of the lake.
And we lose ice earlier in the year than other parts of the state of Michigan. And so some of the qualifications for when the samples have to be taken are boats and other equipment to be on the lake to grab those samples aren't ready for us to participate under the requirements that are being asked. So we've looked at it. It's something we want to do and would like to do and planning to do in the future. We just need to think through how to prepare ourselves to be able to meet the program's requirements.
You guys are ahead of the curve in Indiana. I'm glad you've got a program down there that's working well for you. Several folks are wondering about the toxin testing. How do you gauge when to test for toxicity if you can or cannot see a bloom visible in the water? And can you talk a little bit about what the test looks like? Is that something you guys were able to do yourselves, or was it a lab-based test?
It's a lab-based test. So we grab a 7 milliliter vial of raw water, and it's done each week in both lake basins. So we have a Michigan basin and an Indiana basin. So we take a sample from that. And then anytime we see a HAB, we also take a raw water sample in the vicinity of that HAB to understand the toxins that might be more local to the actual bloom that we're seeing along the shore in a certain part of the lake. It was in all the times we've taken those samples for the toxins in the basin, we have never seen an active bloom.
Yeah, that timing can be tricky.
Yes.
Um,
Yep.
Definitely shows the value of continued sampling, even if there isn't a visible issue going on. Thank you so much, Teresa and Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you.